So UN, United Nations, right? They have a section called the UN Human Rights Council. And really their job is to make sure that all UN members, all the nations that come together to form the UN, are not breaking human rights violations to the point of being a gross crime against humanity, right? Yeah. And you have a situation where you have nations will take an issue, let's say war crimes in Libya or something,
or like first people crimes in Canada.
Yeah, something like this. They'll bring that to the
crimes
forefront.
against first people.
Yeah,
not like, hey, those first people, they're crimes, man.
They're
crime spree. Yeah, exactly.
So you bring that to the forefront, and then the nations will vote on it.
Yeah.
And the vast majority of the time, the nations will come together fairly unanimously to say, yes, let's further the investigation or further a debate on the issue.
So they have debates. In other words, they bring something to the table and then they talk about it and what should be done about it.
Yes. So as
and
you guys know,
if anything should be done about it.
Yes. As you guys know, there's a gross human rights violation happening in Western China, where millions of Uyghur people have been subjugated to forced labor, forced imprisonment, concentration camps, cultural genocide, linguistic genocide, all of this kind of stuff that makes up deleting a culture.
Let's just before we even continue with this, I'd like to play a bit of devil's advocate here. Let's just say you're one of those guys who's sitting on the fence, okay, and you don't really think there's anything too bad going on in Xinjiang. Okay, I'm just saying.
Sure.
I'm just saying.
Evidence aside.
Okay, evidence aside. What would you say to in the modern day? I mean, like right now in the modern day, you pick any minority group in your country, whether it be Native Americans or Roma or black people or whatever it is. Like just you choose the one you want. Yeah. And you say, okay, we are going to separate them from their families, take the men out and go put them in these vocational schools. We're going to,
because that's acknowledged.
Yeah. We're going to just take them away against their will and put them in these massive big vocational schools away from their family and tell them that they're no longer allowed to study their religious beliefs or follow their traditions. They must learn the national language that we've decided they must learn. All right? They're no longer allowed to practice their previous traditions and beliefs and that sort of thing. Because that's at the very bare minimum is 100% what's been happening.
That's what the Chinese government acknowledges.
Yes.
That's what they sell.
Yeah, so like I said, even if you're somebody who sits on the fence and says, oh, it's probably not genocide, it's probably not.
Yes.
At the very least, would you accept that kind of thing? Would you say that that's okay from a human rights perspective to take people and strip them of their religion, traditions, language, and force them to comply to your country's language, your country's traditions? So in other words, it's the same as like forcing a Native American to be Christian. You must be Christian. You must speak English. Yeah. You're not allowed to practice any of your traditions. You're not allowed to grow a beard or whatever you do.
You have to worship the president.
Yeah, you're not allowed to. Yeah, exactly. You have to worship the political party.
Yes.
I'm just saying, like that is at the very bare minimum. So
and memorize all of the manuscripts. Of
yes,
that
exactly. Now, I mean. That's not an extreme example. That's a very, very like small example of what's going on. But of course, there's tons of proof that there is forced labor. There has been sexual abuse. There has been terrible things happening.
Lots of forced sterilization and abortion.
Awful, awful things happening. Yeah. But I mean, at the very least, this is worthy.
You're at the bare minimum.
Yeah, this is the bare minimum.
Yeah.
And even with the bare minimum in mind, you would still think that it's worth investigating, worth debating from a human rights perspective.
Any movement of millions of people into concentration camps, regardless of what's even happening at that point, warrants further investigation.
Yeah.
So then you bring it back to reality and you go, wait a minute, this country has been for years now not allowing any information to come out of this province.
Yes.
Not a drip or drab to come out of this province. The people can't leave. The people can't talk. And then you find out from these leaked files that people are ending up in these camps and in prison for decades.
Yes.
For doing things like praying or using an app with a VPN.
Yeah.
Or listening to a podcast.
Or being in the same house where an uncle was like listening to a podcast.
As a child.
Yes.
Arresting a child and throwing them in prison because their uncle was listening to a podcast.
Yeah.
Then you get into the point where you go, that's absolutely worthy of investigation.
Yeah.
Then you get people that escape, and you get eyewitness accounts of rape and torture and it becomes much grimmer and more horrifying than you could ever imagine, then you go, wait a minute, this definitely requires investigation, right?
Yes.
So the UN sends someone over on a government-sponsored trip.
And by the way, the Chinese government stonewalls
Yes.
for a decade,
Yeah.
basically. But it does
Forever.
not allow anyone to do any
Yes.
investigations, does not allow any independent news or
Right.
anything to look into the situation. And the only time they ever let anyone in is a UN head of the UN to go on a guided tour.
Yeah.
And the head of the UN is also deeply indebted to China and is a big friend of China anyway.
Right,
and is about
the
to...
human rights.
Yeah, the human rights one. And is about to leave her post.
Right.
And so they bring her in at the last minute, and she releases this kind of weak-worded report 13 minutes or whatever before she actually quits, so that she's not forced to follow up on it.
But it did insinuate.
Yeah, it said that there's probably crimes against humanity happening here.
That's the big one.
Yeah.
Right. So here's the deal. Even after all of the duress and kind of stonewalling that you mentioned, she still puts something out that says, yo, there's probably...
Yeah, it's probably something bad.
Massive human rights abuse.
So surely that warrants an investigation, and then that's what was voted on. Okay?
Yeah, so it goes to vote, right?
Yeah, and you get all the countries together and they say, listen, this human rights report says that there's probably terrible crimes against humanity happening here. Should we look into it further?
Yeah.
What do you think happened? Well, maybe you could tell everyone what happened.
Well, it's unprecedented. In the history of this organization in the UN, it's very rare that something gets voted against.
It's only happened twice before, right?
Yes. So 19 nations in the UN Human Rights Council voted no. There can't be any more debate about the human rights abuses of the Uyghurs in Xinjiang.
Yeah, it's like, no, we're not going to debate it. We're not going to investigate it. Get out of here.
This is where we stop it.
Yeah.
Right? 17 nations voted yes, this needs to be looked at.
And
right?
then 11 nations abstained.
Which is...
Now, that's cowardly, to be honest.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Mm-hmm. Now, whether they had their excuses or not, it's a different story, but it literally paints a precedent for the future. And let me tell you why. You could be absolutely heartless here, and you don't have to care about the Xinjiang situation at all. Let's say you just don't give a crap about the Xinjiang situation, right? Mm-hmm. You don't have to.
No.
Because this still pertains to you. It's something we deeply care about, but let's say you don't care about it. This still pertains to you because what this does going forward is shows international diplomacy and relationships to China and has created a clear delineation between nations that support human life and nations that are opposed to human life because
human rights.
And human rights, because their political dictatorships and political power and leadership is more important than the truth coming out of their nation. Their corruption is more important, and their money is more important than any prying eyes into seeing what kind of devious, dirty things are happening.
Well, I mean, do you guys want some proof? That's why you watch us, right?
Yeah.
So we put together a compilation. C-Milk put it together this morning. We first wanted to just show you this quickly. This is the U.S. representative, and what she had to say is kind of poignant. Okay, so let me just put the volume up so we can hear it too. Okay, listen to this quickly. Yeah.
No country represented here today has a perfect human rights record. No country, no matter how powerful, should be excluded from council discussions. This includes my country, the United States, and it includes the People's Republic of China.
So, I mean, I think we can all agree with that, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't matter which country, if there are any kind of human rights abuses, they need to be looked at.
That's why this council exists.
Yeah, it's a human rights council.
It's to look into human rights abuses.
And so if it's something going on in America, if it's
matter
something going on in Canada, if it's something going on in the UK, should be looked at.
Yes.
Right? Should be debated.
Yes.
If somebody does a report and says, there's credible crimes against humanity potentially happening here.
And you vote on it.
Yeah, you vote on it.
That's what happens.
Yes, this is the UK. What they had to say?
They're here to discuss the most serious human rights violations and abuses wherever and by whomever they are committed. There can be no doubt about the gravity and the scale of what has been reported in Xinjiang warrants such a debate.
Okay. Agree with that.
Absolutely.
Wherever, whomever.
Wholeheartedly.
Here's what China had to say. Okay.
Today, China is targeted. Tomorrow, any other developing country will be targeted.
Targeted for what? Targeted to look at human rights abuses.
So let me tell you I'll do, like, explain it like I'm 5.
Yeah.
So you guys can just get a concise viewpoint on this. You don't have to sift through all of these like interviews and stuff. The general consensus of countries that care about human rights, which should be every country, right, is that no one is safe from the UN Human Rights Council's investigations or at least debate into potential human rights atrocities. That's why it exists. No one is exempt. You don't get to say, I'm the most powerful country in the world, and then just be like, okay, no one can investigate me. Yeah. That's not how this works. If you want to believe in this absolute nonsense idea that all of these imperialist Western powers control the narrative over everything so they get away with it anyway, it's nonsense. That's the reason that these councils exist in the first place.
Yes.
Right? Nothing gets brushed by the wayside because it's a Western country.
No.
So that argument's out the window.
I mean, in fact, there's more scrutiny.
Yes.
If there's any kind of human rights abuses going on in Western countries, it gets more spotlight than anywhere else.
Because countries that are developed to a point that they can focus on issues like this are held to a higher standard.
That's right.
As they should be, right? Now, that being said, when it comes to violations of human rights, the actual lives and beings of people and human beings, then that deserves the same scrutiny no matter where you are.
Correct.
Right? And that was the general consensus amongst people that voted, yes, we should debate about what's happening there because China's not telling the truth, or at least not being transparent about it, right?
Right.
China's entire argument for this whole thing, if you go through everything, is that there shouldn't be a debate or an investigation, because if you investigate China, then all these other countries that commit human rights abuses and atrocities and crimes against humanity will be investigated next.
Yeah, you could be next.
It wasn't about, no, we're not doing it.
Yeah.
It's that if you look at us, they didn't talk to the West. They didn't talk to other people. They didn't talk to Japan or these other countries that follow the rules. They were talking to the countries that break the rules. And what they said was, listen, screw these other guys, right? If you today decide to vote to look into this Uyghur thing,
you're next.
You're next. They're going to look into your human rights abuses.
Yeah.
They were on point. They were on the nose. They did not beat around the bush. That was China's excuse. Yes, basically, yes, we are doing this. And you don't want to be caught up in this crap, right? Follow us.
Any other developing country will be targeted.
So now we actually have a list, and this is what you're going to probably not see anywhere else is this, okay? Not this particular picture, but this is the people that voted yes and voted no, okay? So we thought that we'd bring up what the similarities between the people who voted yes and the people who voted no are.
I hadn't seen anyone do this, so I wanted to dig around a little bit. Let's look at the countries that said
who voted no? Who said no, we should not investigate, we should not debate about the human rights atrocities in China? Who said that?
Let's pull it up.
Okay, I'll get us out of there for a second. We've got Cameroon, China, United Arab Emirates, Cuba, Eritrea, Kazakhstan, Gabon, Uzbekistan, Qatar, Venezuela, Sudan. Okay?
Amongst others. What do you, if I was to ask you, like, just to make it super simple, what do you see as a continuity amongst these countries?
They do not have freedom or political rights for the people.
So if you look at the score from Freedom House out of 100 for all of these countries, it classes them into a classification where you can see in that purple square of one of 3 classifications.
Yeah.
There's free, partly free,
and not
free.
So they are all not free. In other words, we're dealing with very authoritarian or dictatorship type countries here. Okay? They're the kind of people that don't want to lose control over their people. They're the kind of governments that enjoy suppressing people and ruling them, with an iron fist. Of course, they're not going to want people to look into what they do. You don't want to know what's going on in a lot of these countries. It's awful. They don't want anyone to know about what's going on.
You have Eritrea, the North Korea of Africa.
Yes.
Probably the 3rd least free country in the entire world on the UN Human Rights Council that actually got a chance to have a speech about why China shouldn't be investigated. And I swear, after this show, please go listen to the UN Human Rights Council speech from Eritrea. China wrote that for them.
Yeah, of course it did.
It's like verbatim.
Anyway, we thought we'd show you that they are What they all have in common is that they're not free countries. Now, how about the countries that voted yes?
I noticed something about a lot of the countries that voted yes.
Yeah, now the countries that voted yes, let's take a look at some of these. Czech Republic, Finland, South Korea, France, Germany, Poland, Japan, Lithuania, United Kingdom, Netherlands, United States. What is the common denominator with these countries?
I see something green there.
Yeah, it looks like these are what you might call free countries, according to Freedom House, by the way, which is a very good website.
Oh yeah, I mean it's a fantastic
organization.
Data organization.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. It goes through all these different factors into how countries are operated, metrics.
Mm-hmm.
All these countries were mostly free, right? Now there are obviously some outliers on both sides of this that some of them were partly free. I'm looking at the big voices here, right? Mm-hmm. Now, when you look at this, it's a clear trend. And Freedom House, when I talk about a free country, I'm not talking about a free country that abuses humans. This takes civil liberties and political freedoms into account. Yes. Free means free for humans, not just for their political rights, but also for their right to life and to be alive.
I mean, take the United States, for instance. As much as everyone likes to poo-poo it, if you're a part of a minority here, you can have a voice. You can go out and protest. You can get an organization together. Yeah. You can go out there and do stuff. You're free to do that. In China, if you're a minority and you're being downtrodden, you may not go onto the streets with a sign that says Uyghur lives matter. Okay, no. You may not go and burn something down and create a riot. It's not possible. No. Before you even get off the ground, before you even walk out of your house, you'll be detained and arrested. Yes. Because they monitor everything you do. That's the difference. For anyone out there who's about to say, oh, but my USA, this and that, please, whataboutism is lame. Okay?
Find a better.
Yeah, exactly. This is just showing you that the Human Rights Council of the United Nations is now being steered by the dictators of the world.
Yeah. I mean, the voices that were voted, can you go back to the purple slide, please?
Sure.
I mean, we're talking about Sudan. Yeah. We're talking about countries that have genocides.
They shouldn't even be on the Human Rights Council.
Why are they there?
They should be on the Human Rights Abuses Council. Yes. We abuse human rights.
They support.
They can debate against the Human Rights Council. You know, yes. We're against Human Rights Council.
Now this is going to get a little bit meta, but hear me out for a second. This is where I wanted to lead with this. You have the argument, and take yourself out of this. Take your bias or weight out of this. Mm-hmm. You have two parties. Let's say the yes and the no groups, right?
Yeah.
And the yes group's argument is that let's further this so we can look into it because we don't want anybody to get hurt and we don't want the curtain to be closed because then those people who don't have a voice will never have a voice forever.
Sure.
Right. So let's keep the curtain open and try to see what's going on. And the no camp is that no, let's not look into it because we don't want to look bad.
Yeah.
The argument is fundamentally flawed from the beginning.
Yes.
The debate is wrong to be voted on because it's not like this is why abortion's bad. This is why abortion should be accepted. Yeah. Both of those have a legitimate arguments where you could actually talk about different points.
Yes.
The point for the no group on this was that, no, we shouldn't look into it, not because it's happening.
Yeah.
It's no because we don't want you to see it.
Yes.
That's crazy.
Yeah, no, because we don't want you to look at our country next.
Like that's wild.
Yeah.
And the reason that Winston and I were talking about why this is such a big deal is this is the moment where going forward, we look at the difference between a world that wants to keep focusing on human rights and keep kind of going down the right path, where all humans are equal.
Yeah.
I think everyone should, fundamentally believe that people and human beings are equal, right?
At least deserve equal treatment.
Yeah. And but now we're going down a path where China has drawn a line and created a sect of the world that doesn't believe that.
Yeah.
And not only doesn't believe that behind closed doors, but believes that legally, from a legal standpoint in the UN.
Yeah.
And that's a dark, dark path.
The whole point of organizations like the United Nations is to ensure that human rights abuses don't exist, or at least aren't carried out as often as they would be otherwise, right?
Yeah.
That's the whole point. And what is the point of a Human Rights Council that has bad actors on it, like actual countries that are doing human rights atrocities? Why do they get a say?
Yeah,
I feel like any of these people that you see here, let them join, but they have like a handicap. You know what I mean? So their vote only counts for like a 0.2% or something.
Exactly. Yeah, but
depending on the current atrocities happening in their country.
So here's the deal.
Back
to Metaland, right? If you look at it, the people that are supporting the human rights investigation, or supporting human rights in general, the countries, they give an equal voice because they believe in equality of humanity.
Yes.
To countries that don't have equal rights, right? So what you've done is you've given the same share to countries that want that to go away. They don't believe in that fundamental idea. How does that work?
Yeah.
How does that actually work?
It's a bad system. And honestly, it needs a bit of a reform. This is looking very much like the Treaty of Versailles. It's looking like the old times where things are just falling apart. This is not a good thing.
No, it's a bad direction.
Yeah. So we need to move on from this awful situation because we all know that this is a farce. Anyone who's got any common sense would be able to see that what's going on with the United Nations is just a joke. All right? It is. It's become a joke. Yeah, in the Human Rights Council. But as far as I'm concerned, that's probably the most important part of the United Nations.
If you're talking about human beings' lives and freedoms.
Yeah. I mean, it's now being run by China and its subordinates.
Yes.
Why is China on the Human Rights Council in the first place? Guys, it's not that long ago that Mao Zedong destroyed the country and let everyone starve to death and did awful things to the people. Not that long ago. Tibet, Xinjiang, what they've done to Hong Kong, what they've done to minorities, Mongolia. Everything that's going on in China right now, as far as I'm concerned, disqualifies China from being on the Human Rights Council in the first place.
I mean, I guess you could use this is devil's advocate, you can use the time-honored tradition of Western powers trying to include China in its current political state on things in hopes that it's going to make it liberalized. And what they've done is propel China in its current political state into backwards reform, into going back to strongman pariah state, like strongman politics, God complex emperor status, closing itself off, but bringing it to the economic status of where it can actually destroy the world.
Yeah, because it can just buy off all the countries that, would otherwise disagree with it.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
Anyway, kind of a bleak thing, and let's hope that there's some kind of action that's taken in the future against this. All we can do is raise awareness, guys.
This is the bad guys versus good guys like scenario here.
Absolutely.
Not the people in those, by the way, the people in those oppressed countries like Eritrea have no say.
They have no say.
Government. They're bully-ass governments making these decisions.
They've got human rights atrocities of their own to deal with, It's an awful situation, guys. And I think the only way to honestly come out on top of all of this is through awareness. Yeah. The more people that understand what's going on, the more people that can discuss this, the more it can get spotlight, the more chance there is of change happening.
Yeah.
We need to have this change.
And the outcome of this cannot be tolerated.
No.
There needs to be an appeal of
It can't be a situation where China could just always veto. Whenever China does something bad and the rest of the world's like, and I mean, how long has the rest of the world been dragging its feet on these issues like Tibet and Xinjiang?
Yeah.
Forever, right? Finally gets to a point where it's like, after like so much sacrifice and so many people trying so hard to bring this to the attention of the world, they finally get to a point where it can finally get like looked into, and China's just like, nah, you don't get to do that. Yeah. We now own your organizations, and we can now basically do whatever we want. This shouldn't be how the world runs.
No, not at all.
You know what I mean?